Lynn. I'm an adulting coach. I help autistic young adults and their families systemize adulting together. Today's struggle comes from parents of autistic adults. Our father says that his son cannot carry on a conversation. He's 15 years old and he talks to his PC and posts videos and makes good grades, but he can't talk to others, carry on a conversation. If he could do that, he could make a friend. So he's asking for any ideas besides speech therapy, which hasn't helped for 12 years. Yeah, I get it. We've really invested a lot of time and energy into resources that may not have met our expectations in terms of leveling up our kids' skills. And so I'm going to give you another option that is not speech therapy. And I'll present it in the format that Barbara Avila from her book, Seeing Autism. The process is where we understand what's going on, connect with ourselves and with them, and then figure out what to practice to take minor steps, mini steps on to solve this problem. So first, we're going to start with understanding. And here's what I think happens with your autistic young adult. Just the thought of conversing with somebody else puts him right into the motivational triangle where he's going to avoid pain. He's going to stay safe because just the idea of having a conversation with someone else live is really frightening to him. Instead, he's going to seek pleasure where he knows he's safe and conserve his energy for those actions. So it makes perfect sense that he's been avoiding having conversations all along. And here's how Barb explains how this happened. Here's a quote from her book. What is noted in the research is that it is not until between a child's first and second birthday that we begin to see the symptoms that qualify for an autism diagnosis. And by the time that an autism diagnosis is made, there's been a cascade effect from that very early and basic social reciprocity. She explains that autistic babies are harder to console, that the link between them and their parent isn't as easily made, so there's no co-regulation occurring. And so that reciprocity where the parent smiles and then the child smiles and that interaction doesn't happen as frequently as it does with a child who has a non-autistic brain. She goes on to explain that it seems that early back and forth social reciprocity weakens with the introduction of objects or topics. Because the autistic young adult or the autistic baby is more comfortable with things that are fixed, they lean toward that as opposed to leaning toward the social reciprocity. The curiosity to the caregiver gets lost, either lost or significantly reduced in the course of development. This challenge to the reciprocity element of joint attention causes difficulties later in life when interactions increase in complexity. And that's what's happening, is that it's becoming more and more unpredictable, as all conversations are, where we need to have flexible thinking and flexible reactions. She further explains, and sorry, this is a very long slide, but I did want to include it because it was some insights. She works with a whole, all age ranges of autistic individuals. And she said that she's learned some really key information from autistic adults. Autistic adults give us a window into the processing difficulties associated with social engagements. They will often share that looking at faces, for example, can be distracting at best and anxiety-producing at worst. They describe sensory input as coming in at all at the same time without a proper filter. I imagine sensory information like a fire hose of input that is so overwhelming that the person has to find ways to shut down, shut out, or fight the onslaught of information. And when they are simply managing this sensory overload, they are certainly not looking for any more information to add to the flood. They are no longer curious about their partner. So helpful, Barb. Thank you very much. And then again, in autism, instead of social reciprocity and joint attention, providing the child with reassurance, they're left to their own devices because it doesn't provide assurance. They turn toward the more predictable elements in the environment. And that's how they cope, feel safe, and grounded. And that's where we see the perseverative interests that characterize many of the autistic young adults that we know and love, that characterize their childhood and young adulthood. So another point that I'd like to make is that when we are that social interactions are pretty complex. There's not only what's being said, there's the nonverbals, and there's the emotion in the tone of what the speaker is saying. And emotions can also be a big black box for people with autism. And it's been described with this word, alexithymia. Alexithymia is just, when we break it down, it means without words or emotions. It just means when a person has difficulty identifying and expressing emotions. It is not anything, nothing has gone wrong here. It's actually it's actually quite common. The research suggests that up to 13% of the population experience alexithymia, where the whole world of emotions is difficult to pin down with words. Makes sense. And it's more common in men than female. And like there's just a lot of information that suggests that this also makes the social interaction very confusing. So that's where we need to connect with ourselves next and say, okay, now that we know what's going on, how do we want to think about it? And right now, I think that from what I can tell, our father is saying that if he could carry on a conversation, he could finally make a friend. So what he's seeing is his son is isolated, and it kind of makes him feel, I don't know, this is my guess, desperate. Like there's got to be a solution so that he can make connections with others. Now, I just want to make an aside here, is that we tend to really think that having friends is important. And yes, it is. I think, though, until our autistic young adult has had some successes in this area, it's going to be difficult to step into that friend zone. And let's just let go of our expectations and see what we can do to create that reciprocal conversation within our own family first. Just a thought about how we want to approach it. Because I'm wondering if we look at it from the perspective of the young adult, his situation is you, the dad, he wants me to make friends, and that probably makes him feel quite anxious. So he avoids it and the whole topic. So he stays anxious. So he doesn't level up his skills. It's a lagging skill and an unsolved problem. And I think it's really important. And thank you to the father who brought this up, because this happens with so many of our autistic young adults. So when they stay anxious, there's just no skills, no friends, no result changes, nothing changes, essentially. So what we need to do is we need to be very strategic in the way that we decide how to practice the development of this skill so that we can solve this unsolved problem. And keep in mind that, our end point is that we want them to not have these skills so that they can become adults. And that's practicing the set of mental tools that help us manage our thoughts, emotions, and actions so we can achieve goals set by us, for us. Because the barrier to him achieving this leveling up of his skills is his fear. And it's all based in his thinking. So I just know that if we take the time to really understand what's going on with him, then we can start taking really inchworm steps toward developing this skill. And it really is important that we create joint attention with this. We need to get low, we need to get quiet, we need to get predictable. So the action that really helped in my family was my son and I take walks most afternoons, unless we're going to the grocery store after work. I have total shutdown of the business at 5 o'clock, and he and I go and take a walk. I'm committed to that. It's been predictable for him. He knows he can count on me, and then he talks to me in those walks. That's what has been amazingly helpful in our relationship. We're connecting better. We're working on the skills. I'm doing all the listening that I can so that he feels heard, and he is explaining to me what his thinking is. It's marvelous. So that's what we do. And it's side by side also is the benefit of the walking. So it's not me talking to him, which can sometimes be overwhelming, as was mentioned earlier. So the side by side, even in the winter, when I have the hood on, he can't even see my face. So it's just the words and the intonation that he's taking in. And that has seemed to help. So I want to suggest that instead of focusing on having conversations, that the first step, the first skill that we teach is listening. Theoretically, in any conversation between two people, we all spend half of our time listening. And yet it's not a skill that is taught very often. So my friend Dot and Bob Bolton, whom I've had the pleasure of meeting, wrote this book and several others on listening skills. And Dot's no longer with us. Bob is still around, but they have really broken this down so that we can understand what just the listening part of communication, of social reciprocity, just the listening part. And I think this is the best part for our autistic young adults to attack first, because it doesn't require that they come up with the various, nuanced responses. It just requires that they take the information in and do the best they can to create an active response. But that's not so easy. So let's break it down. So here's where what the benefit of listening is, that we, letting people know that I understand what they are saying, to me, is a kind of oil that lubricates the entire communications process. So this is the active listening skill that I believe is the first skill that we teach to try to create that social reciprocity that you're looking for. And it breaks down into these three parts. So first, you would say, it sounds like you're upset, is the second part, the emotion, because your dog peed. I don't, give me a better example, because your internet is out. That happens. So this is the reflective listening process. And I just want to say that it sounds simple, but it's not. Because what's required is that we ask our autistic young adults to take it in, sort out the information that's going on, sum it up, and say it succinctly back in their own words. This is not easy. This is why our autistic young adults are lagging their peers, because first, they're afraid of it, and second, because we haven't broken it down. We really need to get low and slow and really break it down and get predictable for them to learn this. So first, they have to take it in, then they have to sort it out, then they have to sum it up and say it back succinctly in their own words. I mean, it sounds like such an easy thing to do, but it's not at all. Another part, the alexithymia, complicates it, because our autistic young adults have a hard time identifying their emotions. And so I suggest that we use this mood meter, where we ask them to explain, where they are in the energy continuum. Like, are they really upset? That would be high energy. Are they kind of not really? That's low energy. Are they comfortable or uncomfortable? And if they can just find their way in this mood reader in one of these four quadrants, we can understand a lot better what's going on inside of them. And if they can identify that in some other person, are they comfortable or uncomfortable? Is it high energy or low energy? Those are the two questions that they have to ask each other. Now, this is from um, Mark Brackett's Permission to Feel book, and he has actually led an entire effort across at least this hemisphere, as far as I know, to really level up emotional intelligence in schools. And he's developed an entire program. So when I read this book, I was so inspired that he was teaching these skills to everyone. And it's just, it just breaks it down. We need that help to break it down. I mean, eventually, he argues that our kids, that some people can actually find all where they are, like apathetic or engaged, easygoing or cheerful, but I don't think we can expect this kind of complexity from our autistic young adults. I think we need to go back to the very simple, where are you? Red, yellow, green, blue. Is it high energy, low energy? Is it comfortable, uncomfortable? Because that's what they need to be able to do in that reflection step. It says, it seems like you're uncomfortable because life isn't going the way you want it to. So this is what we want to do, is we want to teach them how to paraphrase. And this is not easy. So again, we want to reflect the thoughts, ideas, and opinions that were expressed in the speaker's comments. Paraphrasing is a challenge for our children as well. So you can see all the building blocks that are needed in order to create an active listening skill that I believe is the first step in creating that conversation that you're looking for your autistic young adult. And I'm going to suggest that we really want to develop this skill. This is not one that is trivial, because it's going to be necessary at work as well as at home. And it's going to be important that they be able to at least listen well to whoever is hiring them. Otherwise, they probably won't get hired. So or they won't be able to solve problems once they're at work. So I really encourage that listening is the first skill that we teach. And so we would use Dr. Ross Green's collaborative, proactive problem-solving process to do that. So it's collaborative, because we do it together. Proactive, because we do it at a regularly scheduled time, at a predictable time together. We don't do it when emotions are heightened, because we know that means that the prefrontal cortex is offline, because the limbic system that ensures our survival is really running the brain at that time. So we look at, what is their steer map first, which helps us understand where they're coming from. What's the situation in their, we agreed on the situation here. All right, what are their thoughts and emotions about that situation, and how does that make them act? And then, okay, what's the current result? If we can really understand and have them help us understand where they are, that's helpful. And then here's my steer map. That helps them to understand your point of view. And this is where they would be doing a lot. You'd be reflecting here, they'd be reflectively listening in the third part of the step. So that the fourth step of, let's decide what we're going to practice first. Why don't you just reflect a few statements with me when we're in the car, or when we take our walk, or when we're, having something to eat together. See if we can get them to start practicing these skills in a very, very safe environment, and slowly but surely build what's happening, so that they can have conversations, so that they can recognize and at least put the base level words to their emotions, where they're mad, sad, calm, brave. We can just get to some, a few emotions: comfortable, uncomfortable, high energy, low energy is our starting point. And then if we can just identify the color, are you blue today? Are you red today? Or you seem red, you seem blue, you seem green, you seem yellow, charged up, ready to go, and interested. The more we can help our autistic young adults with this part of life, I know that we can help them move along in that adulting objective. And that is where they, let me see if I can find that. There it is, where they practice the set of mental tools that help them manage their thoughts, emotions, and actions so that they can achieve goals set by them for them. That's our goal. So please join me at lynnc.davison.com/blog for the transcript and resources I've mentioned in this video. And I'd love to see you in the art of adulting. This is what we work on together. Bye for now.